The Duke of Athol is one of Scotland's most prestigious noble titles, dating as far back as 1703. But in 1996, a shy land surveyor from Limpopo became the 11th Duke of Athol and found himself commanding the only legal private army in Europe. How's it? My name is Dr. Jacob Seinert, this is Stashy, and you're watching The Historian Stash. Now our story begins in 1996 in Scotland. The 10th Duke of Athol, Ian Murray, lay on his deathbed. Nicknamed Wee Ian ironically due to his 6'5" frame, the frail Duke was unmarried and about to die without children to take over his title. You see, the Dukes of Athol belong to the ancient land-owning family of Murray and have been an integral part of Scottish as well as British history since even before the creation of the dukedom by Queen Anne in 1703.
We're a long line of Athols.
The title can only be passed to a male heir, who would then also become the chief of Clan Murray. In addition to the dukedom, there are 12 subsidiary titles attached to it, too long to mention here. Apart from all the titles, the Duke of Athol resided at the 13th century Blair Castle near the village of Blair Athol in the central Scottish Highlands. The castle consists of 120 rooms and stands on a whopping 566.5 square kilometer estate. Yo! But even more impressively, the holder of the Dukedom of Athol commands the Athol Highlanders, a regiment formed back in 1839 as a bodyguard for George Murray, the 6th Duke of Athol. In 1842, Queen Victoria toured the area and the regiment was tasked to be her escort.
The Queen!
The Queen?
The Queen is said to have partaken freely in the local whiskey, and probably as a result of this, she happily gave the Duke permission to form the Athol Highlanders as his own private army in 1844.
I love being able to do that.
Since then, the Duke of Athol commands the only legal private army in Europe.
I'm kind of a big deal.
So Wee Ian sat on this considerable wealth and prestige, but with no direct heir to bequeath it to.
Meanwhile,
10,000 kilometers away, 67-year-old John Murray was happily retired, living in the tiny village of Heinertsburg between Tsanin and Polokwane in Limpopo province of South Africa. Now John was born in Johannesburg, the only child of Major George Murray and Joan Eastwood. His dad would die in active service during World War II when John was only 11 years old. He was then sent to Michael House in the then Natal Midlands, where he matriculated. After school, he studied engineering at Wits before becoming a land surveyor, a profession he would follow all his life. In 1956, he married Margaret Leach, affectionately known as Peggy. They had 3 children, Jennifer, Bruce, and Craig. For decades, John lived quietly with his family in the northern parts of South Africa. But then, in 1996, John was informed that he was in fact next in line to inherit the title of Duke of Athol.
It has been conclusively proved, sir, that you are the rightful heir.
You see, John was wee Ian's third cousin, and as such, he was the male heir.
My mother's third cousin was the Duke of Athol.
Now, John was aware of his distant relations in Scotland. In fact, he had visited the Blair Castle once in 1994, and he probably knew that there was a faint possibility that he would become Duke of Athol and so inherit the numerous titles and privileges attached to it. But despite this, it never played a factor in his life. The man didn't even own a kilt. So after he was told that he would become the 11th Duke of Athol, old John made it quite clear that he had no intention of moving to Scotland to assume his duties as a Scottish nobleman. According to his son Bruce, John was actually so hell-bent in trying to get out of his new inheritance that he made official inquiries. But he was told that he could not abdicate as Duke. So the only two options left for him was either to go to jail for life or death. I can only imagine the conversation going as follows. How's it, man? You well? Look, man, I'm not too keen on this whole Duke story. Is there any chance I can get out of it? Well, sir, I'm afraid there are only two ways you can give up the title. Okay, tell me. Don't be afraid. Tell me. Tell me. Well, you can either give up the title by going to jail for life or by dying. Okay. 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 Needless to say, John was not prepared to do either, so he reluctantly accepted. Now, wee Ian was not impressed by his heir's intentions to continue retirement in sunny South Africa. Therefore, he decided to hand over Blair Castle and the rest of the land to a charitable trust with his direct relatives among the trustees. There was also a rumor that the real reason why wee Ian virtually disinherited his heir was that he was displeased that the historic Scottish estate was about to get into the hands of a distant cousin in South Africa who might see it as a commercial concern, not a home. But John had no ambitions to inherit the estate. He would later say, "I'm happy that the land has gone into a charitable trust. I have a simple lifestyle and will not make myself ridiculous with a title that does not fit my scene. It means nothing in South Africa. I have Scottish blood in my veins, but no Scottish culture. I respect and honor Scotland as the land of my origins, but I would never want to live there. I am a South African, not a Scotsman. My heart and my mind are in this country." As it turns out, Blair Castle would be turned into a tourist attraction, with thousands of visitors flocking there from all over the world.
Well, that's just great.
Wee Ian passed away on the 27th of February 1996, and so John Murray, the shy, retired landowner from Limpopo, became the 11th Duke of Athol and the chief of Clan Murray.
Wow. I feel like I'm in the Highlander.
Despite being unenthusiastic to embracing the title he had inherited, John still carried out his duties he was charged with. Although he continued to stay in South Africa, he would travel to Scotland each year to carry out his ceremonial duties. As Colonel-in-Chief of the Athol Highlanders, today numbering over 100 men, John would inspect the annual parade at Blair Castle before presiding over the traditional Blair Athol Highland Games with Peggy by his side. He would even go as far as wearing a kilt for such events. The locals quickly took a liking to the new Duke, which was quite a big thing considering the shaky history associated with the title of Duke of Athol. To many Scots, the Dukes of Athol will forever be remembered for being among the first large landowners to launch the Highland clearances in the mid to late 1700s and throughout the 1800s. These clearances resulted in the eviction of land tenants known as crofters to allow for the introduction of sheep farming. Many crofters were forced to emigrate to the colonies, so it turns out John's ancestors really lived up to their name of being Athols.
We're a long line of Athols.
And it was a legacy difficult to live down. But John himself managed to win over the locals through his humility and dedication to his ceremonial role. In fact, he and Peggy would become so popular that even though the castle did not belong to them anymore, Scots would open up their homes to the couple during their visits from South Africa. They saw John as one of them and embraced him as such. John continued to carry out his duties with zeal and dedication for 15 years, but in 2011 ill health forced him to miss his annual visit. Then on the 15th of May 2012, John Murray, the retired land surveyor from Heinertsburg, Limpopo, and His Grace, the 11th Duke of Athol, died at home in his beloved South Africa. He was 83. As a sign of respect, the 2012 parade and Highland Games were adorned with flags at half-mast, and crowds gathered at Blair Castle to pay their respects to their revered Duke. As eldest son, Bruce Murray inherited all the titles from his dad and is currently Duke of Athol. Bruce's son, Michael Bruce John Murray, the Marquess of Tullibardine, joined the Athol Highlanders after John had recruited him. He now serves as an officer in the regiment along with his younger brother, Lord David Nicholas George Murray. Michael is also now next in line to be Duke of Athol. The story of how John Murray became the 11th Duke of Athol is almost as extraordinary as the man himself. As a South African, John loved his country so much that he was willing to give up a prestigious title of Scottish nobility in order to remain here in quiet retirement. While he eventually took up his God-given responsibilities, he did it without the financial advantages of his predecessor, and he preferred it that way. He performed all the duties required of him in his historic homeland, as long as he could return to South Africa, the land of his birth, and eventually the land in which he is buried.